They sing every word.
Psukit is from the beginning of davening until Shochenad. It's very long. Yeah.
You get
Is that
there
right?
before, if you get there around 11.
No, he told me it should end around 11:30 davening. That's what he told me. Oh, you have connections.
Have an inside.
You have an insider, yeah.
So I think is he the president? Of Benja Tree? He's my
Saul.
Tony.
Okay.
I talked to him yesterday.
Well, he doesn't dub it there. He goes to the Bernard Batel across the street.
No, he's very involved.
Is it?
Yeah. I think he might be, but I could be wrong, but he's very involved. 12:15 is what I'm here. It's all good. It's beautiful.
It's all good. No, but then there's a luncheon, and he said that the luncheon itself takes a long time. Like we won't start talking until 2 p.m. Yeah. But that's his assessment, Rabbi Kadosh. All right.
As long as there's couches, we're good.
Yeah, I better sleep well Friday night. That's okay. It's a good thing it's a long day. That's all I can say. All right. So yesterday, what we were discussing was this machlokes between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim regarding the latest time to recite Kriya Shema at night. The Chachamim say you only have until Chatzos, and Rabbi Gamliel says you have until dawn. And unlike the Bavli, which reconciles the two opinions, the Yerushalmi is of the opinion that these are two completely different opinions. There's no point, according to the Chachamim, in reciting Kriya Shema after Chatzos. You've lost the mitzvah. So the question that the Gemara asks is, what right did Rabbi Gamliel to paskin halacha l'maisa against the majority ruling? It's one thing to have an opinion, but it's another thing to actually go halacha l'maisa against the majority rule. That's really the whole theme of the Gemara that we're in the midst of, which is an interesting discussion unto itself. When does an individual have a right to take liberty with going against the majority, and when does he not? And that's something that we'll talk about when we finish. We're in the middle of the discussion here. So yesterday, the Gemara had said that there are three examples of great rabbis who paskined against the majority, but still, as a public policy, abided by the majority rule. Okay, remember that? So the first case that we saw yesterday was Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir himself felt that you were allowed to prepare this alvantis salve on Shabbos, and that it was not a violation of the rabbinic prohibition of preparing medicines on Shabbos. But when it came to his own predicament where he got sick or he had a big headache, and his student said to him, Rebbe, why don't you prepare this salve and just use it? He said, no, because the Chachamim said you're not allowed to. But they said, but you yourself disagree with the Chachamim. He says, no, I feel that as a public policy, I need to be machmir like my colleagues. That was case number one. Case number two was Rabbi Akiva, where we saw that Rabbi Akiva was actually more stringent than the Chachamim, and he felt that if you have skeletal remains from two different bodies, that does transmit tumas ohel in a contained room, and the Chachamim said that it does not. So when they were faced with that kind of situation, and they were able to find skeletal remains that were from two different bodies, and they asked Rabbi Akiva what should be the resolution. They wanted to know, what should we do? What should we do as far as dealing with these skeletal remains? Well, let's take a vote. And Rabbi Akiva said, it's fine. So they said to they were confused. Rabbi Akiva was the one who normally said that it transmits tumah, what we see from that story is that Rabbi Akiva, when it came to public policy, removed his own personal opinion and went with the majority. And then we were in the middle of this third opinion yesterday. So that was the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. There's a machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim regarding sefichim, which is things that grow naturally on their own, like vegetables that grow naturally on their own, if they start growing during the 6th year, and then they continue growing into the Shemitah year, everyone holds that those are permissible. However, there's one that Rabbi Shimon says is not acceptable, and that is the cabbage, because they grow very, very quickly, and we're worried that if a person sees you eating or plucking a cabbage on Shemitah, he'll think that you planted it on, or that it started growing on Shemitah itself, and therefore it doesn't look right. But the Chachamim say that all things that grow on their own, that grow from season to season, and again, the commentaries say this is only for vegetables, this is not for fruit that grows on trees. Fruit that grows on trees, that grows wildly on its own, you're allowed to have, even if it grows on the Shemitah year. But vegetables, things that are normally planted that actually turn out growing on their own, you're not allowed to have them at all, the Chachamim say. Even if they started growing during the 6th year, and their concern was that just like a cabbage grows quickly, if we allow you to have vegetables that grow even on the 6th year, that are harvested on the 7th year, people will permit cabbages as well.
So you're talking about the owner, not like the poor people coming in and giving it.
It's actually, I think that this is a reference to even the poor people as well. So if you take a look at footnote number 4, it's a valid question. Hal, bless you. He says, Bishnat HaShaviyit, during the 7th year, Asura Hazriya Be'eretz Yisrael Min Torah. The Torah prohibits you from planting anything during the 7th year. Okay? Ulam lefa'amim tzomchim tevua v'yerakos b'sada me elehem below zriya. But sometimes things like wheat and vegetables will grow on their own. Ve'ela nikroim sefichim. Those are what the term sefichim that our Gemara our Bryce is making reference to. Peiros ha'ilan hatzomchim me'aleim b'shvius mutarim b'achila. So anything that grows on a tree, that grows on its own, that has not been planted, just happens to be freely growing, that's permissible to all. Ela shehem hefker l'chol, but they are hefker to everyone. V'nohagim b'chol dinim miyuchadim shel kedusha. And the produce has certain restrictions on it as far as having the kedusha of Shemitah. But that's what's free for everyone to come into the field. Ulam sefichim shel tfua v'kitnios v'yerakos ushar hagidulam hanizram midei shana b'shana shetzamchu b'shvius asurim b'achila. But sfichim that are from vegetables, legumes, and grains that grow on their own, if they grow on their own during the Shemitah year, starting on the Shemitah year, then you're not allowed to eat them. The Das Rabbi Akiva Isser Zehu Min HaTorah. According to Rabbi Akiva, this is a biblical law. And we'll just ulam ladas chachamim min haTorah mutarim asvichim b'achila ela shachachamim gazru amalei va'asr mipnei ovrei avera. But according to the chachamim, it's only prohibited midirabanan, lest people come to plant. Because if we're worried that if we allow people to eat wild growing things, they may come to plant them. So next paragraph, Rabbi Shimon sover ka Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Akiva that sefichim are aser midioraisa. He says, "V'asfichim shehitir him sfichim shegadlu bashishis v'nilketu bashvius." And therefore, the only time that he allows sefichim is if they started growing on the 6th and they get harvested in the 7th year. Shelo asra haTorah sfichim elim kein af gidulam hu bashvius. The Torah only prohibits, according to Rabbi Akiva, sfichim that only started growing during the 7th year. He says, but then he says, "V'lav davka sfichim shegadlu me'alehem shehu adinim nizru b'dei adam beheter b'shishis." And that's true even if they were planted in the 6th year and they continue growing into the 7th year. Rabbinically, so Rabbi Shimon holds that those are going to be permitted, except for the cabbage. So really, tzvichim is a misnomer here. Anything that started growing in the 6th year that's of a legume, vegetable, or grain nature, and even though it started growing in the 6th year and continues and you harvest it in the 7th year, Rabbi Shimon holds that it's permissible unless it's cabbage, and the Chachamim say they're always going to be prohibited. And this is so there's no distinction here between the poor and anyone else. Okay. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Avid Uvda b'Shemitata, that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, that's the same Rabbi Shimon that we're discussing, he went against his own opinion, and this was the episode. Chamachad malaket sefiche shavias. He once saw someone plucking sefichim, like let's say vegetables that were on the Shemitah year, even though they had started growing in the 6th year. Amar lei v'leis aser. So Reb Shimon said to him, "Why are you doing that? Isn't that prohibited?" So v'lav sfichin inun. He says, because aren't they sfichim that even though they started growing in the 6th year, you're not allowed to benefit from them. Amar lei v'lav ad sha'at matir. So the man turns to him in shock. He says, aren't you Reb Shimon who says that they're permissible as long as they started to grow in the 6th year? Why are you then criticizing me for taking them? Amar lei ve'ein chaverai cholken alai. But Reb Shimon said, but my colleagues disagree with me. And therefore, as a public policy issue, we have to be machmir. Ukroi aloi, uporetz gader yishachenu nachash. And Rabbi Shimon said to him, because the guy started to blow him off, he said, he who breaches a fence or breaches a wall shall be bitten by a snake. This is a pasuk in Koheles, which basically says, don't violate the things that the rest of your community is upholding. Even if you feel that you're allowed to do it, porei together, you break down the wall, you get bitten by a snake. And v'chein havaslei. And that actually, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was known as a miracle worker. So when he said that to that guy, it actually turned out that he ended up getting bitten by a snake for ignoring Rabbi Shimon's admonition to stop harvesting those sefichim. So those are 3 stories. Now we've seen Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shimon. All 3 of them go against their own psak halacha in order to conform with public policy. If that's the case, what right did Rabban Gamliel have to allow his sons to recite Kriya Shema if, according to the Chachamim, it's already past the Zman?
That in a private setting, though? Does that matter?
It is, but even so, remember we saw Rabbi Meir's situation was also a private setting. It was in his own home. But he wanted to set an example as one of the leading rabbis of the generation. When it comes to my own situation and my own household, I have to be mach. So the Gemara, the Rabban Gamliel, Polagal Rabbanan Vavid Uvda Kavate. So what right did Rabban Gamliel have to practically paskin like his own opinion when he should have conformed to the Chachamim? So Shanya Hacha Shehi Lishinun. So the Gemara answers that there's a difference over here. Shanya Hacha means it's different over here. Why is it different? Because reciting Kriya Shema, even though the time has already elapsed, there's no big deal, because it's like studying Torah. Shinun from the word Vishinantam Levanecha, meaning that it's Talmud Torah. All Rabban Gamliel was telling his sons is, listen, guys, even though I hold that the mitzvah of Kriya Shema still is extant until dawn, we have to go like the Chachamim that it's for fallen. You've already lost out on the mitzvah. But you know what? Recite Kriya Shema anyway to fulfill the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, and maybe that'll help remind you the next
time.
But you're not really Yotzei. So that's the Gemara's first answer. So the Gemara then asks the question, but me'ata af mishiyala amud hashachar. Then why did Rabban Gamliel tell them that they had only until dawn? I mean, let's say they got back really from a wild party, like at 4 or 5 in the morning, and maybe why did he tell them you only have until Alos HaShachar? If it was only for the purposes of Talmud Torah and they had already lost the time-based mitzvah of Shema, then why did he put a limit on dawn? So the Gemara says, you're right. That must not be the correct answer. So there is a second answer. Their second answer is V'is the boy lememar. There are those who want to answer the question a different way. Taman hayu yicholim lekayim divrei chachamim. B'ramhacha kavar ovar chatzos v'lo hayu yicholim lekayim divrei chachamim amar lon uvdin uvda kivase. So the Gemara gives us a totally separate answer. And the Gemara says, in all of those three aforementioned cases, when the three previous Tanoim had deferred to the majority rule, that's because it came to a vote and that they had to decide how to go. It was an either-or proposition. It was either I go like the Chachamim, not like my personal psak, or I go like my personal psak. But I don't have a chance of doing both. In this situation over here, it was already no longer possible to go like the Chachamim.
Mm-hmm.
So when faced with the prospect of I can either go like the Chachamim or I can go like myself, I'm going to go like the Chachamim, either more lenient or more stringent. But in a situation like this, where I no longer have the option of going like the Chachamim,
Yes.
because the time has already elapsed, then Rabbi Gamliel says, okay, guys, you have no longer a choice. You'll have to rely on my opinion to recite the Shema.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I hold that you have until dawn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's totally distinguishable from the other cases.
All right. So now, as far as this issue, let's take a look at this note over here, the bottom paragraph of the first column, where the art scroll says like this: Lefi maskanas haGemara kan nimsa she'achein ein liyachid litzo kedaito neged harabin. According to the Gemara's conclusion, it seems that the Yerushalmi's attitude is that even if you disagree with the majority, you should never dissent from the majority rule. Afilu l'chumra, even if you want to be machmir, and that's certainly true if you want to be lenient. V'ha'achronim tamu al kach min ha'mavur bebavli. But the later commentaries are very surprised at this attitude because we have many examples in the Talmud Bavli of rabbis taking the law into their own hands, meaning going like their own personal psak. Shahayu tanoim shahoru kishitasam af lahakel neged rov chachamim. There are many cases of tanoim who went like their own personal opinion, even when they were being more lenient, and certainly when they were being more machmir. Umin hamavur b'maskanas hasugya sham shebei samai asu kishitasam neged divrei beis Hillel. One such example is when Beis Shammai, who were in the minority at the time when this halacha was being decided to do like their own halacha, having to do with what is considered to be an erva, what is not considered an erva, as far as are you allowed to do yibum with this woman or not. Afal pisha halacha kebeis Hillel, even though this created a public policy crisis, because as the Gemara over there in Yavama says, that there was a period of time when you had to identify, like if you wanted to make a shidduch, that a Beis Hillel family wanted to make a shidduch with the Beis Shammai family, almost like, a Sephardi and an Ashkenazi wanted to make a shidduch together, but there was a difference in psak halacha such that someone from Beis Shammai could potentially have mamzerus involved, because Beis Shammai allowed you to do yibum in a case where Beis Hillel said you cannot do yibum. Okay, so and if you cannot do yibum, it's because the woman that is proposed to do yibum with is considered to be a relative, right? Because remember, yibum is marrying my sister-in-law, right? Yeah. My deceased wife's sister, and if according to Beis Hillel, or a woman who was married to my brother. Sorry, that's what I mean to say. My deceased brother's wife. If my deceased brother's wife is permitted to me by the Torah, then I do Yibum. But if she's not subject to Yibum, then she's an erva. Then she's a relative of mine. And if I have a child with her, that child will be a mamzer. So there was a certain category of woman where Beis Shammai says, do Yibum with her. And Beis Hillel says, don't do Yibum with her. So there were cases of where Beis Shammai did Yibum. And according to Beis Hillel, the product of that union was a mamzer.
Example of that?
Well,
What's the example? You're marrying someone that's
No,
considered
but-
married, you're not allowed
What's
to.
the?
the if you recall from the first Mishnah in Maseches Yevamos, if a man dies and he's married to two women, one woman is permissible to me outside of the fact that she was married to my brother, and the other woman is, let's say, my aunt. Okay, she's not my brother's aunt, but she's my aunt. Okay, so according to Beis Hillel, both women do not fall to Yibum. Both the woman herself does not fall to Yibum, nor her tsara. Remember that word tsara?
Yeah.
Those of you
Who forgets?
who painfully learned Yavamas.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not
Yeah.
bringing me back
Okay.
to that reason.
So in that situation, Beis Hillel says both women do not fall to Yibum. Beis Shammai says, no, only the aunt does not fall to Yibum, but the other wife does fall to Yibum. Okay? So for Beis Hillel, doing Yibum with that woman would constitute incest, whereas according to Beis Shammai, it's not incest, it's a mitzvah. So
Wasn't it usually the opposite, that Beis Shammai was more?
normally. Right, but this is okay. Bottom line is that even though this resulted in a crisis in public policy, because now every time, so the Gemara says, well, how did they do it? Like, how did they function? And the Gemara says they maneuvered. Whenever there was a proposed shidduch between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, they would look into the lineage and see if there was a case of yibum in that particular family.
It still was relatively rare.
Yes, of course, yeah, it was very rare. But in any event, that's what they had to do. V'chein danu, and so just to continue in this footnote, he says, V'chein danu ba'ot stiros b'inyan zeh. And there are other examples of this, where individual chachamim ruled according to their psak. They stuck to their guns, even though it went against the majority. There's a very famous Mishnah in Maseches Idios with Akavia ben Mahalal El. Akavia ben Mahalal El, the Gemara, the Mishnah says that when you close the doors to the Azara on one of the Shalosh Regalim, when everyone was gathered there was no one smarter than Akavia ben Mahalal El. He stood out above everyone else. But he was still an outlier when it came to certain areas of halacha. And he stuck to his guns. When he was on his deathbed, he told his son, you need to go according to the majority rule. So, father, he says to him, why didn't you go according to the majority rule? So Akavia said, I received the tradition from my teachers. And the tradition that I received from my teachers enables me to go according to their opinion, their derivation system of halacha. And that's why I know that I'm right for myself. But you're living in a different era where the halacha has already been arbitrated and concluded and decided, and therefore you have to go according to the majority rule. So it seems from that Mishnah that when the halacha is in the process of formation and you're part of that generation that is formulating the halacha, you're allowed to dissent. Yeah. It's only after the fact that the halacha has been formulated and accepted by the community that you have to defer. So that leads
to a lot of problems.
Yeah, sure. When I first came to town, COR had a policy to ban kitnius, but the OU on Pesach, but the OU's policy was to permit kitnius for Pesach. So one of the first maybe one might argue foolish things I did, was I said, even though the COR prohibits, I permit it based on the ruling of the OU, who say that kitnius is perfectly fine for Ashkenaz,
Like the Coke,
for
Diet Coke.
that quinoa. I meant to say.
Quinoa.
That's what I'm talking about. I meant to say, I said,
I was wondering about that.
I meant to say quinoa.
That would really be.
Won't be here anymore.
No, so I said that quinoa is fine on Pesach. So, and then also, and Rabbi
Rabbi was ahead of his time because now everyone.
So now it's become, I mean, I think that's due to my intervention, because I said, no, I pushed back. And I said,
It's not every time we have to on Pesach, thanks to.
there are enough things that we can't eat.
Absolutely.
You know.
It's a really nice difference.
Did the Ravs of the city agree to you eventually, or like
Yes.
the Loy and Rav?
No, the core, basically, their policy became over the time that since I'm here, they said, ask your local rabbi.
Right.
So, but they still, as a public policy, when they want to give a hechsher to quinoa on Pesach, they'll write for Sephardim, just like they do with the Diet Coke. Even though the OU permits Diet Coke on Pesach, because it's a variant of kitnius, it's a derivative of kitnius.
So it's not a kittiest mamish, like it's not real, so then why even mention it that it's kitty?
What's the aspartame?
It's a kitnius derivative. It's a kitnius derivative. There's some corn that they use to produce aspartame, but it's chemically altered.
I asked this question this year in Israel. They changed they don't write kitnius on Coke Zero in Israel anymore.
Okay.
So they allow it because they changed one enzyme in the making of it, not to get around the kitnius, which is a problem. Like they did it because they just changed it. And that, so the Rabbanut gives full hashgacha on Coke Zero.
Yeah, well, the OU permits it even without any changes to the.
Do they still do it here? They put it for smart.
Yeah.
On here.
The core does.
Yeah. Anyway, but it seems that the Yerushalmi is not making any such distinction. So therefore, he says, "V'chein danu ba'od stiros be'inyan zeh, v'herichu lases klolim shonim b'davar." And therefore, the Achronim strive to come to some kind of reconciliation between the very stringent perspective of the Yerushalmi versus the more liberal case histories that are cited in the Bavli. And he doesn't actually tell us how we get to reconciliation, because there are rules that a person would have to follow, perhaps, that could help reconcile the two opinions. But the bottom line is that it could be that this boils down to a difference of attitude between the Yerushalmi and the Bavli. We know that one of the areas of attitudinal difference between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi is that the Yerushalmi is more conciliatory. It doesn't try to fan the flames of machlokes. And the Bavli, those Babylonian rabbis love machlokes. So that could be part of it psychologically as well. I'm not sure. Okay, but now, so anyway, let us go on. We're now up to another quote from the Mishnah. If you recall, the very last part of the Mishnah, which is what we want to see, is the Mishnah had said that hekter chalavim ve'evarim mitzvasan ad sheyale amud hashachar, that there are a number of things that you can do until dawn. And because what was Rabban Gamliel telling his son? He said, if the dawn hasn't yet arrived, you guys should recite Kriya Shema and do it like my opinion, because there's no other choice. And then he further said, hekter chalavim ve'ivarim mitzvasan ad sheyale amud hashachar. Similarly, when it comes to the offering of the fats and the remaining limbs of a korban that was put on the altar in the afternoon, the entrails of the animal can continue burning for the entire night. We know that from the Torah when it talks about the korban ola. It says that you burn it during the day, but if you put it on the mizbeach, it can continue burning through the night. Okay, but and kol hane'echolim liyom echad mitzvah sanat shi'ala amud hashachar. And furthermore, the meat that you are given permission to eat on the day that you bring the korban and the following night, you have until dawn to eat it. Im kain lama amru chachamim ad chatzos. Why did the chachamim say you only have until midnight? Kedei laharchik es ha'adam min ha'avera, in order to distance a person from sin. So that was what the Mishnah had said. The chachamim had placed a restriction on a person when he's allowed to have sacrificial meats until dawn, that he should only eat it until chatzos halayla. So what we're going to be seeing tomorrow is we're going to be talking about the mitzvah of korban pesach, where the chachamim said the same thing. Really, the korban pesach can be eaten until dawn, but the chachamim made a rule that you have an obligation to make sure you eat it before chatzos. This has applications even halacha l'maisa with the eating of the afikomen. So we'll talk all about that in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Okay.
Just clarify about the definition of a loan, sir. I always thought, I think I'm mistaken, that it only